The women I work with in my coaching practice are not undisciplined, not by a long shot. They think they are, but they're not. What they are is undertrusted, specifically by themselves. They stopped trusting themselves somewhere along their lifeline. And they think that the way back is a bigger commitment, but it never is. It is a kept commitment. So that's what we're going to talk about in today's episode. Welcome to your daily hit of grace and grit, your quick dose of inspiration to kickstart your day. I'm Courtney Townley, and here is today's hit. So I have worked with a lot of women over the years who had self-trust issues. In fact, I think it's really the reason I wrote the book, The Consistency Code. It's a book all about rebuilding self-trust. But I'm going to tell you about a client today who I worked with really early on in my career. For the sake of the show, we'll call her Robin. But I think Robin stands out because I was a pretty young coach at the time. And Robin was someone who had had a couple decades at a minimum of starting over on her health journey. And a lot of us can relate to that, right? Maybe it's not your health journey, but there's some area of your life where you feel like you're constantly starting over. And she talked about herself in a way that was very casual and almost factual, but it was also incredibly dangerous. And I think the very reason she was stuck. So she used language that I bet is going to sound familiar to you because we've all done this somewhere in our life. She said, "I'm just someone who cannot stick to things." And I want you to notice that. She didn't say, "I have not stuck to things," which would be pointing out her behavior. What she kept saying was, "I am someone who cannot." That is a statement of identity. I am someone who cannot is a conviction to not being able to do it. It's not a behavior, it's an identity. And when I asked Robin to tell me everywhere in her life where she did stick to things, where she did show up, where she did make an effort on the regular. Of course, there was a moment of silence. There might have been a few moments of silence. But eventually, she did what all of my clients do, which is she started pointing out how she showed up with her family and her friends and her work and basically for other people. She was incredibly reliable for everyone who mattered to her. The only person she ever treated as optional was herself. And again, I said it at the beginning of this episode, I'm going to say it again. That is not a discipline problem. That's a worthiness problem. That is a not putting yourself on your own schedule problem. Robin did not believe she was someone who deserved to be kept as a promise. She wasn't someone who deserved time and attention on her own schedule. So, of course, I did not give her a plan to follow. I just asked her a question. I said, "Robin, here and now, we are going to pick one thing that you are going to commit to this week that is going to make you feel really good at the end of the day that you purely did just for yourself." And you know what her one thing was? It had nothing to do with food and exercise. Her one thing was she was going to make her bed, which sounds silly, but Robin always kind of got up early in the morning. Her husband slept a little bit later. And by the time, she went into the room to get dressed and all the things, she just always skipped the bed. And she said, it drives me crazy because I love a clean space. I've always taken pride in my home. And when the bed isn't made, it kind of just creates this internal grinding all day. Like there's this internal friction. Awesome. So we committed to, Robin, committed to making her bed every day over the course of the next week. I know that sounds so silly, but here's what happened. Not in a dramatic way, and not after one breakthrough session, but slowly and quietly and through repetition, Robin started to build evidence. evidence that she showed up for something that she cared about doing for herself. That when she said she would do something, she did it. And that evidence began to rework an image. It began to rewrite a self-narrative that she had been telling herself for years about who she was. I say this in the book, and I say this a lot to my clients, that self-image work is really, I believe, the master key of behavior change, because we will always act in congruence with how we see ourselves. So if you're telling yourself on the regular that you're just not someone who follows through with promises that you make to yourself, well, guess what you're going to keep creating is evidence that that is true. So the fastest way to change what you believe about yourself is to create new evidence, which means you have to behave in a new way. And you have to behave in that new way on the regular, enough that you start generating new evidence. This is what I mean by one promise kept. Because once you keep one promise and reap the benefits of that, you will keep another promise and reap the benefits of that. That is the consistency code. That is the way of it. It's not a 90-day transformation. It is a slow, quiet accumulation of proof that you are exactly who you are trying to become. You are exactly who you are devoted to being. That's what integrity is. It's aligning those two versions, right? The woman you're devoted to being with how you're showing up today. And I mean, here's the radical truth, right? Self-image work, it's not sexy. It's not glamorous. In fact, most people don't see it. It's all underground work. It's a bed made. It's a word kept. It is showing up for yourself in the smallest possible ways so many times that you eventually stop being surprised by it. You just become that. You become someone who keeps her promises to herself. How would your life change if you actually kept the promises that you made to yourself? And here's the thing to remember, right? We have to be reasonable about the promises that we make, right? Because if I set the bar so high that I can't possibly meet it, that's not useful either. So what is one simple commitment you could make purely for yourself today in devotion to your own health and happiness that you could actually follow through with? Start there. And then do that again tomorrow and the next day. And start to acknowledge the benefit of doing that. And I bet you'll want to keep going because it feels pretty amazing. If this stirred something inside of you, imagine what a whole book of clarity and courage could ignite. The Consistency Code, a midlife woman's guide to deep health and happiness, goes even deeper into the mindset and practices that create real, meaningful change at midlife. Grab your copy today over at theconsistencycode.com and keep the momentum alive.